I do want to talk about your take on like the state of journalism ethics today from your
Yeah.
perspective and from your work. But before we do that, maybe I can do that by way of a little bit of your background. I saw that you were a journalism major and then you went into marketing, if I'm understanding that. So,
Yeah.
how did that go?
Yeah. So I was someone who always knew like what I wanted to do when I grew up, if you want to put it that way. So I majored in English in undergrad. I went to the College of William and Mary, Go Tribe in Virginia. And then I applied to journalism programs. I think I applied to like three, like Texas and Syracuse and one other that I'm forgetting. And I thought there's no way I'm getting into Syracuse. I accepted to go to University of Texas, and then I got into Syracuse, and I was totally shocked. And of course, I jumped at the chance because the Newhouse School has such an amazing reputation, and I did the year-long magazine, newspaper, and online journalism master's degree there. And I found it to be just so great. I had a blast, and it's exactly where I wanted to be and exactly what I wanted to do. But unfortunately, the timing when it comes to, um, you know, everything was obviously digitized by then, and I had student loans, and so I sort of was butting up against this reality where I was realizing, I could move to New York City and cram myself into an apartment with like eight other girls, or sort of like face the music a little bit and maybe just pivot for a little while. And I ended up getting a job at an advertising agency in their marketing department. And that's sort of where I started. I moved to Colorado, Boulder, Colorado. That's where the ad agency was located. And as a lifelong East Coast girl, it was totally shocking, but looking back, it was like something that I didn't know that I needed. I absolutely loved my time in Colorado. I was there for about 3 years. I lived in Golden and a town called Westminster, and I worked. That's where I worked at the advertising agency. Um, so yeah, I had a little bit of an unconventional path, and that also has to do with the fact that my husband is in the U.S. Army. So um, I moved from Colorado to Florida after we got married. Got married in 2016, and that's where I worked at the Northwest Florida Daily News for about 9 months. So I got some newsroom experience, which was really invaluable and great. I absolutely loved it. It was like as close to I think what you could envision an old school newsroom would be. Like it was like the old metal desks, like sort of like the disgruntled, managing editor, but she was lovely and wonderful. I learned a lot from her. Um, Covering stories like, sea turtle migration and local crime, which I really loved. And so that was great. And then we moved to Maryland, and I worked at a startup, a murder mystery game startup, actually. So I worked marketing for them and copy editing. And if you work at a startup, you do a little bit of everything. So I really loved that, like the startup energy. And that's something that I also love about the free press where I work now. So I don't know how much you want to go me to go into that, but after Maryland and we moved to Israel. We were stationed there for 2.5 years, and that was just totally another eye-opening and enlightening experience. The military really kind of pushes you into to experience all these things that I just never envisioned that I would. So I learned so much there, and I worked for a startup out of Tel Aviv. And when we moved back to Maryland, I sort of looked at my daughter one day, and I was like, this is really now or never. And this was at a time where I was a little jaded by what was going on. You mentioned like journalism ethics and sort of my philosophy behind that. I had sort of like sadly a little bit put that behind me, because I'm like, I didn't like anything that was happening in the news. I felt it was so one-sided, so biased, whether it be too conservative, too liberal. I was finding that there was nothing in between, and it had me asking, like, okay, but what is the truth? Because if you're too, if it, I'm reading this and it's too liberal, it clearly has the liberal slant. I'm reading this and it's too conservative, then I'm not reading the truth. So where's the truth? And that's when I started reading and listening. I think I started listening to the podcast first. It was called Common Sense. That's what Barry started after she left the New York Times. And then the blog also was called Common Sense. So I started reading that and I was jazzed. I was like, this is truly something that the news landscape is missing. It was straight down the middle, as I saw it, questioning what was real, what wasn't, trying to get to the truth. And so, yeah, I pretty much like stalked them ever since then. And I actually applied to be the copy editor, and that didn't work out. So I just sort of stayed on it, and I pitched them a couple pieces, and Margie Conklin, who was the managing editor at the time, said, go ahead, like, let's do this. It was the NGOs make billions at the border article that I wrote. And I spent many months looking into like the money and kind of following the money behind what was going on with immigration and billions going to these NGOs. And why was there so much money? I couldn't believe like how much money was involved. When you look at, usaspending.gov, that's where you can like see where the money goes. And yeah, I was offered a job. Actually, it'll be a year ago on August 6th. So I've been having fun ever since. It's been great.
That's great. My story is similar, not in terms of career or vocation, but when, I was like you, where I was consuming some, let's call it mainstream media, legacy media, whatever it is. Yeah. And, let's just be honest, in the past 10 years, we know what that's been like and what the focus has been on. And you're exactly right. It seems like you can choose either one extreme or another extreme, and there doesn't seem like an option for this sort of like, not middle way, but let's just say a publication that has a mission to try to get at the truth and try to be as transparent, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to hear, so can we dive right in and get specific on like, what were the things that stood out in the Free Press? I mean, I have my own ideas, but like your impression of when you read the Free Press, just like me, you were going, well, this is something different. If you could be specific, like what are the things that made that different?
I think it was, I'm trying to remember like some of the specific articles, but I think it was, when Barry, and it was because I think it was mostly Barry and Nellie writing it most of the time at the very beginning. Barry questioning things like, DEI and just wokeism in general. Some of the, the transgender stuff. When she started writing pieces and talking to people about that, I was like, okay, this is someone who is creating media that I'm not seeing anywhere. It's almost like the mainstream media was like too afraid to broach these taboo subjects. And at the time, I believe I was on Twitter. I know I joined Twitter the day actually that Elon Musk took over. But sometimes I would like, click links to like tweets or something, and I'd just be like, this is like, it's a cesspool out there. Like, I'm very much one of those people who I think it's that saying where, the truth is always somewhere in the middle. And I think that a lot of times there's a lot of lack of like common sense in the news. And that's what I was yearning for. I was like, this just seems so, it was like all these like DEI stories and, in the universities and everything like that, the Twitter files, when Barry was a part of exposing what was going on there. I think it was very eye-opening, her questioning, the COVID, what happened during COVID. And I think, again, it was like her bravery of speaking out and writing about it and talking to experts about it that I was not seeing anywhere else. And to me, I was like, okay, I am getting this spark of hope that I haven't felt in the journalism world in a very long time. Like I guess I didn't realize how dead I thought it was, like how just the news, like I don't read that. I don't, why would I? It's fake. Basically, it's not real. And so when I saw what Barry was doing, I was like, wow, we might really have a chance here. And it's actually crazy to think about how much from that point, from the Common Sense days, the Free Press and the Common Sense and the Free Press and what Barry has done has changed the landscape. I mean, we see a ton of new independent journalists out there now who are not afraid to speak up and out about, what's going on. And I think it really caused, like, it really sparked a movement that I latched on to completely.
I have the same impression. So the Free Press clearly has staff writers. They have stories from different perspectives. And they
Yep.
even say, I think on their like mission statement or about like, we want you to,
Yeah.
engage with us and disagree with us. So what sets them apart?
I think what sets them apart is like, and I'll give this example. During the holidays when there, or maybe it was like in October, we had like a free press, what is it called, like when everyone gets together, like not a convention, like a conference basically, up in New York City. We all got together at the offices in New York City, and we decided to just take an informal poll, like, if the presidential election was now, like, who would you vote for? And at the time it was, Trump, Kamala, or if you're undecided. And it, no joke, down the middle, it was a third undecided, a third Trump, and a third Kamala. And I think that having that checks and balances, especially like, I have an editor, but you kind of work with all the other editors, which has been amazing because they're all lovely and wonderful and they have so much experience. You know, if you think something about one way, they're going to think another thing, and they're going to call you out for it, and they're going to say, you need to go get an interview and interview someone who says this, or who doesn't believe this, or who get this perspective, even if it's not on purpose. Like, it's, say I'm writing something and I just didn't think about, talking to someone who had that perspective or didn't think about that angle. My editor, who may have a different point of view than me, usually does, will say, hey, do you think you can go out and let's find someone who thinks X, or let's find someone who just, can give this sort of different angle perspective. And that makes the stories that much the richer. It makes it much more balanced. I think when you have a newsroom, is it I'm sorry, pregnancy brain. It's the Washington Post, I think. Or no, it was NPR. NPR that has, I think, like a 89% or more of the people who work there are registered Democrats, right? So I think when you have that, it's like, well, what do you think you're going to get? Like, what kind of news do you think you're going to get? And when you have a newsroom that's like a third independent, maybe thinks a third more conservative, a third more democratic, you're going to get that balance. And I think, again, I really can't think of any other publication that can pride itself on that. So I think when you have those checks and balances in place, and when you have people, amazing people who have been in the business for so long, pushing you to think of things another way or come at it a different way, you're gonna get good news. Like, you're gonna get the full story. And I can tell you with full confidence that, like, the story I just wrote about, like the fire aid funds, I'm like, okay, I feel good about this because you think of all the angles and you want to cover all those angles. And yeah, I think that's one of the best parts of the Free Press is, like, we all just have different viewpoints and perspectives, and we can all talk about it cordially. And that's what makes it fun,
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to come back to that fire story, maybe even as like a case example. It's, I think it's the most recent story that you wrote.
Yeah.
But I hadn't thought about it until this moment. But while you were talking, I was wondering about the parallels between what I do, which is teaching in the classroom, and what you do there. It seems to me there is a teaching element to journalism, right? You're telling the story,
Always.
you're actually like teaching people. And when I see from, let's say, legacy media, again, I see phrases like, you brought like life-saving masks or gender-affirming care or
Yes.
reproductive rights, and they phrase things and they charge things in a way that doesn't reflect that there's an issue that's being discussed out there that isn't, let's say, settled or obvious in a way. And it doesn't reflect, I mean, maybe it reflects the readership, just depending on the readership, but it doesn't reflect, let's say, the country and where we're at on any of those controversial issues. So I think it's kind of cool that, like, I mean, you're teaching in a way as well, but it sounds like your sort of philosophy of journalism adopts the same. I don't know if neutrality is the best way to say it, but at least, yeah, transparency. Maybe you have a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I just think it goes back to, like, you want to try your hardest to get rid of the bias, like scrub it out. You want to get to the truth. And like I said, the truth to me as a journalist, there's a little bit of truth in it all, right? There's like a little bit of truth in both sides. I hate that saying, like, my truth, like, oh, my truth is this, like my lived truth. Like, no, it's what is the truth? What is the truth? What happened with the fire aid funds? Is Fire Aid the organization, have they done great work? Yes, absolutely. They have given money to organizations that have given like $1,000 gift cards to people who are struggling. But you have to think of it on the other side too. Like, well, people are standing around in the Pacific Palisades wondering, like, where do I get these funds? Why aren't they just giving them directly to people who need it rather than trickling down through this, nonprofit structure? And that's a very valid question as well. So I think that, yeah, I think it's just like, I'm very old school in how I think about it. And it's like, you just want to be as unbiased as possible, even though as a human being, you're going to have, general like spark of thought. Like, I think it maybe happened this way. Maybe the story happened this way. And I can tell you that there have been so many points where I'll be on the phone with my editor being like, yeah, no, this is actually how it happened. Like, this is actually what I'm hearing from people on the ground. Like, this is actually the story. And so the story totally changes. I mean, that happens like every time, the story completely changes. And on your point about, teaching people through the articles, I actually never look at it through that lens ever. I look at it from my point of view is every single article I write, like, I'm learning something. I'm taught, like, my favorite part about it is I love writing, but talking to people. I could talk to people all day, like talking to random people on the phone. And my husband's always like, the fact that you can just dial a random number and like talk to people is crazy. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, why not? It's like, I want to know their story. I want to know what they saw, how they feel, like what's going on. And I think talking to people as a reporter and, being able to consider, learn, that's my favorite part of the job is I learn, no joke, I learned something about how the government works, what happened at the Pacific Palisades fire, the unaccompanied children program, which I've reported on for a while. Everything I write, I learn something. So that's how I'm looking at it is like, wow, like I never knew about that, about XYZ. So it's interesting you're saying like, I'm teaching people through my articles because I mean, I guess that's the whole point of being a reporter. You're reporting what you learn. But no, I always look at it as like I'm the student.
Yeah, I think that's totally valid. That's a good point. And so on the fire story, maybe I can ask it this way: is are there themes that come up in terms of your motivation for writing stories? I think I heard you say at one point that at least part of your motivation is sort of following the money.
Yes.
And obviously your stories have reflected that. And you have, I don't know what, over 30 stories or something like that at the Free Press now.
Yeah.
And so, that's obviously a big part of it, but like, how would you describe your motivation for writing a story? And then maybe can you tie that into the most recent like Palisades fire story as well?
Yeah. So you hit the nail on the head. I really love stories where you have to like, and I've talked to my editor about this all the time, like where you have to dig into documents like FOIA, like numbers. I want to like follow where are the numbers, like 990s, looking at 990 forms, like who were these nonprofits contracting with? Like, let's find out how much their executives were paid, like what's their overhead, how much they're actually spending on administrative, that sort of thing. Which is hilarious because in college, I took the math class I needed to take and skipped out of that so fast. But now I find it to be fascinating to look into these documents, and that's yet another example of like always learning. Now I like looking at numbers and data and finance. And I never thought I'd be saying that at 35, but so that is my main motivation is like, hey, what these numbers like aren't adding up. Like, let's look into this a little bit more. So when I saw Andy Ngo's tweet, is Andy No? I think it's Andy No. Maybe it's Andy No. His tweet caught my eye about the fire aid. And then I looked into, the Annenberg Foundation, which was, leading the committee to recommend where these funds should go for the Pacific Palisades fire, the $100 million that they raised. I just started sort of like following the money trail, and it got murky. And when things get murky, you sort of have to start asking questions. So I think that is my main motivation. My main thing is, to me, as American taxpayers, what is the government? What are people spending your money on? I think that every American should know. It should be very, like, I always say this, and people are like, "That's not possible. That's not." But like, I think that the government should give you a receipt. Where did your money go? Like, I want to know where our tax dollars are going. I think that's a very fair ask. You give so much of your money to state, local, federal government, and I think at times, like, when you learn, for example, what the federal government is spending your hard-earned money on, you're like, why? Sometimes it's like, why am I even paying like, I don't want my money to go to that, you know what I mean? And I think that's a very fair thing to look into and to dig into, and to say, like, hey, let's question this a little bit. Like, do we really need to be paying for I don't know. I mean, isn't Rand Paul the one who always stands up and talks about all the ridiculous like all the ridiculous things that our money is going towards, like in research and you know, so I think that, to me, it's about, like, is this right? Is it right? What is our taxpayer money going to? Is it right? People work really hard. You see it in your communities, and you just have to ask, like, is this fair? And I think my motivation is, like, yeah, let's follow the money. Let's see, like, what is fair. People are generous with their money, even when it's hard out there to pay for groceries and childcare and you name it. And so I think, like, let's just see where this trail leads. And it's not too much to ask for fairness in that regard. So, sorry, that's probably really long-winded, but
Oh no, that it's great. And so a follow up is, for those who aren't familiar with NGOs,
yeah.
what would you tell someone like myself, your perspective, well, describing them, I guess, in the first place, and then through these stories, what have you discovered and learned that the average person just would not be aware of?
Yeah, I think it depends on, how you look at it, right? I think, NGOs are non-governmental organizations. That's what that stands for. And it's basically very similar, the same thing as a nonprofit. They have they have to fill out what are called 990 tax forms. All of those tax forms are public. And what a lot of people don't know, actually, is the larger NGOs that the government, grants money to. And let me tell you, the government grants billions and billions of dollars to NGOs for you name it. Like I said, I'm most familiar with the NGOs that dealt with the huge influx of immigration under the Biden administration. The government paid billions to shelter the over 400,000 unaccompanied children that crossed the border, transport them around the country, feed them, you name it. Like, billions of dollars went to this. And, when you look into their 990s and you start to ask yourself, like, the CEO is making $1 million. And to me, when you look at a nonprofit, I'm not sure that a nonprofit CEO should maybe be making $1 million. I don't know. That's just the question. I'm not sure. Maybe, sometimes people say, well, it's a very huge nonprofit. Well, should nonprofits be huge? I don't know. So I think that one thing that people don't know about these large NGOs that contract with the government is, if they are granted by the government more than $750,000, they have to do what's called a single audit, or a CFA audit. And I learned this through my sister, who's an accountant. And all of that information is public as well. So you can trace the money. Like, you can look at these CFA audits and trace the money. Okay, the money was granted by the Department of Health and Human Services. It went through the city of Albuquerque, and then it went into the, nonprofit. So that's something that I found very interesting, something that I did not know before about these CFA audits. And I use those audits often to track, where this money is going, where it went. And, I think that that's not to say that nonprofits don't do good things. I think there are plenty of local and state nonprofits who do very important things, especially, like my local community action center. And, everyone has like a local community action center. Like, they do very important work. But I think, when it comes to when it almost becomes a business, what I call like an industrial complex, like the NGO industrial complex, when these NGOs are fully reliant and getting most of their money from the government, is not just a business. So I think isn't that just like a for-profit business? You would think. So it raises a lot of questions to me, and I think that what people might not know about these huge NGOs is they have a lot of power, a lot of pull in the government. And I think that it's important to look through these 990s and look through these CIFA audits and, you know, check up on them every once in a while. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can I ask you about your access to organizations, maybe to, I don't know, high ranking officials, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Sources or something.
Sources. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Maybe I can put it this way. Has working for the free press, can you think of cases where working for the free press gives you an advantage in access and maybe in some cases gives you a disadvantage, just depending on,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you covered a number of stories and I'm sure you hear a lot of yeses and a lot of nos as well. So how does that work?
Yeah, no, for sure. I actually hear way more yeses. I absolutely the free press, like just being able to say like, "Hi, I'm Maddie Rowley. I'm a reporter for." I usually say like Barry Weiss is the free press. I think that has opened so many doors. It's because it lets people know like, okay, like this is a legit publication. We've grown so much. We're very serious about our journalism. I think people and like sources within the government, like I would like to think that they regard us as a publication who wants to get to the bottom of it, and is not going to is gonna our whole goal is to tell the truth, so be right down the middle. So I think that's how I think most of the sources that I have inside the government would regard the free press as. But yeah, I think that if I was just like emailing them with my like personal Gmail, they'd be like, who are you? So I think it really helps to have that, the free press name behind you. And yeah, I would say like as you write these stories, every story you write as a journalist, you gain like another contact. And it's that's one of my favorite things is like, oh, I could write a story on this and I could reach out to this guy at ICE, or and we all like help each other. Like if one of my colleagues is writing a story about I think it was like an immigration adjacent story, and he was like, hey, like do you have anyone I could reach out to about XYZ? I was like, yeah, sure, like reach out to this person. Like it's very collaborative in that way. It's not like you're like hoarding your like people, your sources. Because I think like the more people who have touch points with the free press, whether it be inside the government or just in general, the better. So yeah, I think that the free press has definitely, and we actually, I think I interviewed Secretary Hegseth, like this was several months ago, right before he was confirmed, maybe. And I think through that, and through just like, Eli Lake too writes a lot of those stories, that we actually got an office in the Pentagon. Now we're too small to staff that office within the Pentagon, but we have a seat there. So I think again, it's like we're growing, and I hope to continue to grow.
That was going to be one of my questions. So I'm glad you brought this up.
Yeah.
Was you work with a lot of seasoned journalists? Has there
Mm-hmm.
been? I'm interested in your relationships with your colleagues, and also has there been, because it seems like you all are scattered, so it isn't
Yeah.
like you're all kind of like in a newsroom,
Mm-hmm.
but have there been opportunities for like real relationships with colleagues and even mentorship by some of the staff there?
Oh yeah. So even though I work remotely, most of my colleagues either work at the DC office or the New York office. So I would say most of the staff is in the New York City office, and then we have like maybe like 4 or 5 in the DC office. And I live in Virginia, so I go to the DC office sometimes. But that's also a great thing about the free press is they're like very understanding of like, okay, my husband's in the military and I can't talk to him during the day. Like I can't reach him. So I'm kind of like parent number one, parent number one. So my daughter, she goes to, now she's in summer camp. So I'm That's why I work from home, and it's been lovely. It works out really well. Unless I'm like, I'll go into DC to meet someone or whoever, whatever it may be. But no, I would say that at first it was very intimidating for me because I'm coming at this left field. Like I said, I'm like 34. I can't believe I just landed a job at the Free Press. Who are you even? Like just imposter syndrome, basically, right? And no, no one made me feel inferior in any way. Like I think it's because we all care about the mission so much. It's just like an automatic, like, come on in, like, oh, I know who you can reach out to about this. You can reach out to this person. Like, it was an automatic, like, everyone is just so great and normal. And no one has an ego at the Free Press. And like, in terms of mentorship, my biggest mentor there has been Joe Nocera. He is a storied magazine writer. I look up to him so much. He was my editor at first for probably the first 6 months, and the thing about startup is things shift around, and then he became the deputy managing editor, so he had more responsibility and things shift. And my editor now, Rick Brooks, spent 20 years at the Wall Street Journal. Like these are seasoned vets. And so I couldn't be more thankful. When I tell you that I learned something from them every day, I can pick up the phone and call Joe about anything at all. He's like a dad figure. He's like a dad figure to the whole staff. And that's what makes it so great is like, I'm new to the game really. And they know that. And yet they still, you learn something every story, and then they'll be like, that was a really great job. You did, XYZ, great job. And then, next time, like, let's try this. And it's always a learning experience. And I was telling that to my mom on the phone the other day, like, everyone is just so great and so normal, and there's no egos involved, and everyone just wants to work and get the story and get the truth and get it out there. And so that's what we really do all day.
Do you have like colleague friends at, let's say, legacy media, mainstream media, and like, do you have insight into it's so as a consumer, I have my ideas on how things are changing, how free
Mm-hmm.
press is affecting that directly. But from the inside, what does that look like from your perspective that we as consumers might not understand in terms of just the inner workings of like journalism in general? I know that's a broad question, but what are you seeing that maybe we aren't seeing?
Well, that's such an interesting question because now that I am, I guess, on the other side of it, I would love to know your perspective on it, right? Because, yeah, no, I think that, like you're asking if I like have colleagues or like friends who work in mainstream media, and like, yeah, I do, and I met them through the Manhattan Institute's fellowship program. I'm trying to think. I guess I don't really know anyone that works at Fox except for like whenever I do interviews like Martha McCallum or Dana Perino. Like Dana will text me and be like, great job, like, or looking forward to talking to you later. Like again, just the nicest people. Like, and I was terrified at first before talking to Dana Perino. Like, um, she texted me like, "Hey, really looking forward to talk to you. Loved your story. Like, looking forward to chatting on air later." Like, just to my direct phone. I'm like, this is insane. Dana Perino is texting me. And Martha McCallum, same thing. They always chat with you before you go on. Like, how are you doing? Like, tell me what's new. So even though maybe I can't call them like, friends, I like to think, they're my friends, but I would say more like mentors. Like, they have very clearly smart women and men. I've been on the bottom line with Dagan and her co-host. It's like escaping my name right now or my mind. But no, I think that everyone has been very welcoming to the free press. And I think that you'll see in like, at night when you're watching the news or whenever you watch the news, they'll cover our stories. And so I think it's one of those things where it's like, we see what they do, they see what we do, and we can kind of riff off that. We dig deeper into maybe a story that they've done, or they'll have like Gabe was on Fox News. My colleague Gabe Kaminsky was on Fox the other night talking about the news cycle. So yeah, I think when you're a journalist, like the world becomes a lot smaller, I would say, the news world does. But I'd be interesting to hear what consumers think about it. Because, like you said, it is shifting, and it's a shifting landscape for sure. Hopefully,
Yeah,
I
and
answered it. But yeah,
no, that's great. I can so I can see why in some cases Fox News would want to cover some of the stories. Um, what is have you had similar invitations from other networks, and maybe generally, like, how would you describe the relationship between the free press and maybe some of the other networks?
yeah. So I personally have not. I think I've only been on Fox that I can think of, and maybe a couple of like radio channels. But no, I've primarily been on Fox. Many of my colleagues will go on CNN. And I would say that because Barry, it's a situation where Barry knows everybody, will talk to everyone. Everyone's like her friend. Like, so through her, like, I think people are like, oh, so and so writes for the Free Press. Oh, well, duh, they know Barry. So, like, let's have him on. Like, I think that that helps tremendously because one thing that Barry is very good at is um, she's like again, she's like a friend, like very normal. Like the last time I was in the office, it was a while ago, but because I'm, expecting, but she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're pretty." Like, she's just like a friend, like very friendly, and I think that through these relationships that she's made at all these networks, she's been on MSNBC, I think fairly recently, CNN, Fox, and so I think that many of our reporters kind of run the gamut and um, are very open to going on any network. I think we can slot right into any of these networks, and again, that's what makes the free press kind of rare, I guess, in today's landscape.
Yeah, and it seems like it goes the other way as well. I mean, I remember with the podcast,
Yeah,
with Honestly, and I'm a regular listener. Just love it. I remember when she had Jerry Seinfeld
yeah,
on, I watched that one and I was looking at it and I was going, this interaction is very familiar. They look like they are old friends. How is it? Jerry Seinfeld has been one of my like comedy. I mean, like everybody else in America, but I
yeah.
was watching that just social dynamic going, oh, there's a familiar relationship there. This didn't just start.
Hmm.
And so I noticed that. And then just with the variety of guests that she has on,
Hmm.
and also this, I mean, Coleman Hughes just coming on and doing
Yeah,
his as well. She gets such a variety of people from all. So to your point, that has just sort of blown me away at, to your point, yeah, how many
yeah.
contexts she has in
And it's
across
all
disciplines.
right, and it's all genuine. I want to say, like, it's all genuine. It's truly like when you watch her interact with people, like she wants to know how you're doing, what you're into, like what's new. I don't know how. I mean, she doesn't. She doesn't have the time of day, really. Like, I truly think she must sleep like 2 hours a night. We all say that. We're like, we think she maybe just runs off 2 hours of sleep and a lot of coffee, but um, like she really wants to know about you, about whoever she's interviewing. She wants to get to that, and she's an, as you know, if you listen to Honestly, like she's like an expert interviewer. Like I look up to her so much. I actually just did a media training yesterday with Lucy Biggers, who does our social media and all of our media stuff. And I personally, I hate going on. I'm not, TV is not my favorite. I really am shy and would rather just stay behind the laptop and just have that be that. But in watching Barry and how she conducts herself, it's like, oh my gosh, like again, another learning experience for me, just like watching her talk to people and interact and be so, comfortable in front of the camera. And how she is in front of the camera and on the podcast is how she is in real life. There's no difference. So, yeah, I look up to her so much.
That's very cool to hear. Yeah, as someone
Yeah.
just like yourself, when I was following her and the Free Press from the beginning, that was my hope and my
Hmm.
impression. But it's really cool to hear. I'm a fan
Yeah.
of Barry. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask. So there must be some. Well, let me just ask you there. What stories are in your mind right now that either
Mm,
that you have challenges that you didn't anticipate. Maybe it's more than one. Like, what kind
yeah.
of stories are you dying to get out there
Oh
and
my
tell
gosh.
people about that we don't know about?
Um, that is a very good question because often you're working on like what I would call like a quick turn story, like the fire aid story. That was a quick turn story that happened in about a day. But you have these stories that are like running in the background that you might be getting emails about, or you're making calls about, or begging to get a FOIA across the finish line, which I'm doing now. It's most difficult to work with the government, I will say. That might not be shocking, but yeah, they just move a little more slowly than the news cycle does. So it's a lot of, and I'm someone who I'm not going to give up. Like the story about how sex trafficking, and trafficking in general, actually, labor, sex, etc., underage or unaccompanied children tripled under Biden. I got that information through a FOIA that I spent 5 months. I would call every single day, email every other day. And it's a situation where you're like, I'm not going to let this go. And it's almost like you have to show them that you're not going away, that you aren't giving up. And I tell them that. I say, I'm not giving up. You're going to keep seeing my name in your inbox. You're going to keep seeing my number on your phone. And so that's what I think I'm in the middle of that now. I'm begging for a FOIA. It's another story about unaccompanied children that I hope to get out. We're getting a lot closer. I had a great call yesterday, so it's one of those things where, yeah, you just can't give up, and you have to be nice about it, but you have to just say like, you're gonna keep seeing you're gonna keep seeing me pop up everywhere you go. I'm not going away. And then there's another story I'm trying to work on with ICE, and it's a specific story actually that it's one of those stories that I've sort of reported on before tangentially, but I want to dig deeper into it because now it's coming up a little bit more in press releases, ICE press releases. So or at least I've noticed it, and I've noticed states turning their attention to it. I might as well. I want to dig into a little more about. They're called illicit massage parlors. It's basically like trafficking happening right down the street from you. They're everywhere. So I've been noticing that DHS and ICE are conducting enforcement operations at these locations more and more. So, I'm trying to dig into that a little bit. Like, is this something that the government and state law enforcement agencies are focusing on now? Which would be great. So that's one that I'm adamant about as well. So yeah, there's always these stories that are like going on in the background, or these situations where you're like just hoping you get like a nugget of information to continue on. So
Are there stories where, well, I'm sure there are, but which stories have you written on where you look around and you go, why am I the only one covering this? Or what, let's say, why is the
yeah.
Free Press the only publication covering this? So is this kind of a two-parter? And then is part of your job for other stories going, what is, for lack of a better word, like my competition reporting on under this same topic
Mm-hmm.
on whatever it is, like
Yeah.
NGOs or immigration or whatever it is? So I'm interested in those two categories where you're going, why is there silence on this? This seems so important. People would be interested. And then the latter.
Yeah, I think that is another reason why the free press has been so great is because, like, with my sex trafficking story, for example, and the unaccompanied children story, there were, you know, I think situations where there are stories where other publications they don't want to touch it. They don't want to touch those stories. Whether it may seem like too right wing of an issue, or and I think that's the main thing is like, is this story like right wing coded, or is this story too left wing coded, whatever it may be. I think that legacy publications tend to shy away from those, even though it's like a story that's happening. It's real. The story is happening. It may be just that they don't want to listen to the sources, or they would rather not deal with certain sources. So I have absolutely run into that. Not at the Free Press, because they were like, whoa, this is, whoa, this is crazy. Like, yeah, you got to look into this. Like, keep looking into this. Like, all I've gotten is encouragement. Um, and then in terms of, sorry, what was the second part of your question? It was,
Well,
oh,
you
my
covered topics that,
competition.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly right.
for sure. Like, I'll, like, and they all do great work. Like, the Daily Wire, I think it is, also has done reporting on unaccompanied children. And like Luke Rosiak, I really look up to his follow the money stories. He does like an unreal job. He just wrote a story a couple of weeks ago on like $1 billion USAID scheme that I read, and I was just like, oh my gosh, my jaw's on the floor. I like sent it to my editor, like, how do I do this? Like, how did he do this? Is this from a tip? Is this from, is he looking, did he find a court document? Like, um, yeah, absolutely. You want to look at, I guess, your competition, but it's also just people I look up to who I think do really good reporting and really good investigative journalism that takes a long time, a really long time. And that's another reason why I love the Free Press. It's like I'm a walking billboard, but they give you the time to to dig and to go like deep. And a lot of, it's gotten better actually. It's not like when I was in grad school and like 2013, it was like BuzzFeed everywhere. There's like BuzzFeed listicle stories. I'm so glad we're like beyond that. I think it's gotten so much better, and it's like so interesting to see how the pendulum has swung from like these like BuzzFeed like bite-sized stories, and now we're back to like unbelievable profiles written about people. Investigative stories. Like, I'm so thankful. Like, thank God. Um, and so the Free Press and your editors will let you, like, they give you the time and the space to dig and to read documents. And it makes me feel like I'm like again, old school stuff. There's no other way to put it, which I like. So
Yeah, I think that's really important. And so if someone is, let's say that they're in college or just out of college and they are looking to get into your field, they're
yeah,
looking at getting into journalism, what sort of principles, advice, guidance would you give them, given just the landscape as you see it today, the journalism landscape?
I would say pitch, and don't just like pitch to pitch, but like if you see an angle or a story, or you come across something really interesting and you think like, oh, this would be a really good Free Press story. Oh, this would be a really good, Atlantic story, whatever it may be. Flesh it out. And the way that I sort of got in was I spent probably a week doing like in-depth research and putting puzzle pieces together. It takes work. Like, put a solid pitch together and put it out there. Like, whether you're out of college or even not out of college, like that's what I learned. Is I was 33 when I pitched, maybe 34, no, 34, 33, when I 33 when I pitched to the Free Press. And I actually pitched to Michael Schellenberger first, and I worked for his publication for a little while. But I think that if you're right out of college and you're wanting to be a journalist, obviously it helps to have written at your like college paper. That helps your resume and whatnot. But the best thing you can do is just start pitching and putting pitches out there and get your name out there a little bit, and not be afraid. Get on the phone. The best way to like, you have to fake it till you make it. Like, that's all I do. I do that all day. That's, I mean, it's like I still can't believe that I work at the Free Press. I mean, it's like no one's. One thing I've learned is like no one is an expert in anything. I think is, except for Eli Lake, who's like the historian of historians. Like, he knows that, he seems to know like everything. But no, I think that just putting yourself out there and going after it, like get after it, and you have to be the hungriest one in the room. And I think that's, I will say, like something that I was really hungry for it, and I wasn't gonna give up. So that sounds cliche, but and I also want to say like it again for me. I was feeling really. I was like, it's never going to happen for me. I missed my mark. You know, I'm a military wife. I've got a kid. I've got responsibilities. Like I should just whatever. We'll see. But I was like, you know what? Screw this. Like I got to try it. And yeah, I just like kept kind of wiggling my way and I just didn't really take no for an answer. I really became more familiar with what the free press was publishing and started pitching like what we call like free pressy stories. So yeah, just get after it is
I love that. Maddie
my
Rowley,
advice.
thank you for your
Yeah.
time. I think that's awesome. I love that you, this is one way to put it, are still sort of starry eyed about the free press.
Yeah.
That sort of, in a way, gives me encouragement. I'm still the same way. I mean, like I said, I've been a reader for a long time. I love it. I'm just on board with their mission. Barry, thank you. There's no way she's going to watch this, but thank you.
She might. She might. I'll
Yeah.
put the link in our Slack.
Okay, great. But have just so appreciated that. And from the consumer perspective, your writing, the writing at the Free Press, has been such a breath of fresh air where I can go, oh, there are other people out there who are reporting and seeing the same things and asking the questions that like I wish was out there. The
Yeah.
stories, the perspective, the angle. So really appreciate your writing. I'm a reader from afar.
Oh,
And
great.
thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it, Jared.
Where can people find you if they want to follow your work?
I would say check me out on X. It's at Maddie underscore Rowley underscore. And then, yeah, at thefp.com. Check out all of our stories there.
Perfect. Thanks
Yeah,
again.
of course.